Now here's a serious question. What happens when a director gets so disgusted with his own fans that he spends $200 million just to destroy his most popular character? Well, you get one of the most expensive middle fingers in movie history. And it all started with a clown who became too popular with the wrong people. So fans have been going crazy for the Joker ever since Heath Ledger turned the character from comic book bad guy to iconic rebel. But when Todd Phillips made his own Joker movie in 2019, something went wrong. People loved Arthur Fleck a little too much. They saw him as a hero instead of a villain. And Todd Phillips absolutely hated that. So what did he do? He made a sequel that was basically a 2.5-hour middle finger to a predominantly male audience that he found reprehensible. Phillips essentially felt like his first movie had been completely misunderstood. He was trying to make a serious statement about mental illness and society, but instead, he somehow created a popular icon for people he didn't like. So he came back with a part 2 that turned the once gritty psychological crime drama into a musical and made his tough anti-hero weak and pathetic. Phillips took money from Warner Brothers to make sure everyone who loved the first Joker would hate the second one. And he got exactly what he wanted. The second Joker movie had a budget of around $200 million, but only made $207 million worldwide. So Warner Brothers basically lost tens of millions of dollars once you account for all the extra marketing and distribution costs. It got a 5.2 score on IMDb and 31% on Rotten Tomatoes. But you know what? Phillips didn't care. He later admitted in interviews that he never wanted to make a sequel in the first place, but Warner Brothers offered him so much money that he couldn't refuse. And he also didn't want to risk the movie being made by someone else. So instead of just saying no, he took their cash and used it to create one of the most expensive movies made out of pure spite. And in a twisted way, the second Joker movie accomplished exactly what Phillips wanted. It made sure no one would ever confuse his Joker with a hero again. The Matrix Resurrections 2021, when creative control meets corporate revenge. By 2003, the Wachowskis thought their Matrix story was finished. But Warner Brothers was desperate to continue milking the cash cow and demanded more movies from that universe. They even threatened to make more Matrix movies without the Wachowskis. So Lana finally agreed, but only on her terms. And her terms were simple, but absolute. Complete creative control. Lana would write, direct, and produce the film herself, with absolutely no studio interference. She would essentially make the Matrix movie she wanted to make, and her terms were crystal clear. If Warner Brothers wanted her name on it, they would have to accept whatever vision she brought to the screen. And you know what? The studio accepted her terms. Big mistake. Because, well, she didn't make a sequel. What she produced was 2 hours of Lana Wachowski complaining about having to make a sequel. Characters in the movie literally talk about how much they hate reboots. And the villain is basically Warner Brothers trying to force Neo to make more Matrix content. And that's pretty much the plot. The result? Matrix Resurrections became one of the most expensive acts of creative sabotage in Hollywood history. The movie had a budget of $190 million, but only made $160 million worldwide. So it was a complete and total box office flop. And Lana had successfully turned one of the most culturally valuable IPs into a financial dead end and probably killed the possibility of any future Matrix movies, which, let's face it, was most likely her plan all along. Deadpool 2016, when studio interference creates a decade-long vendetta. In the early 2000s, Ryan Reynolds discovered his perfect character, but there was only one problem. That character was brutally cut short and not even given the opportunity to speak. So what did he do? He spent 11 years fighting to make it right. You see, Reynolds fell in love with Deadpool, a comic book character who was funny, crazy, and totally inappropriate. So when Fox Studios offered him the role in X-Men Origins Wolverine, he said yes immediately. But then Fox took everything cool about Deadpool and threw it away. They sewed his mouth shut, they gave him weird powers, and they turned the funniest character in comics into a boring villain. Fans were furious, and Reynolds was heartbroken. But instead of giving up, Reynolds turned his heartbreak into fuel. For over a decade, he begged Fox to let him make a real Deadpool movie. He wrote scripts, he made test footage, he even leaked that footage online when the studio wouldn't listen. Finally, Fox gave him a budget of $58 million and a February release date. Why February? Well, because February is the month where bad movies go to die. That's how sure the executives were that it would flop. But instead, Deadpool went on to become the highest-grossing R-rated movie ever made at the time. The original Deadpool still has a 90% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. And the recent Deadpool, the one with the Wolverine team-up, well, that movie grossed well over $1 billion, with an even higher Rotten Tomatoes audience score of 94%, making Deadpool one of the most valuable superhero IPs to date. So, from mouth sewn shut to multi-billion-dollar empire, Ryan Reynolds pulled off the ultimate comeback. Shrek 2001. When fired executives build a new empire out of spite. So, what happens when you fire the guy who helped make your company billions of dollars? Well, you might just create your biggest competitor who makes it his lifelong mission to outcompete and out-earn you while also mocking everything you ever create. And what I'm about to explain in the next few minutes will help you understand why Shrek hates Disney so much. Jeffrey Katzenberg was responsible for building Disney's animation empire. He made The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast into massive hits. But then, in 1994, Disney's #2 executive Frank Wells died in a helicopter crash. Katzenberg expected to get promoted to the job the Wells had left behind, but Michael Eisner refused to give it to him. The power struggle that followed got so ugly that Katzenberg was forced out of the company he'd helped build. And Katzenberg was furious. So he started his own company and called it DreamWorks. And his first big cartoon was called Shrek, a movie that basically took every Disney princess story and laughed at it. The princess turns into an ogre. The prince is a very obnoxious villain, and even the talking animal sidekick is annoying on purpose. But what happened next was truly incredible. Shrek became a huge hit and the fourth highest grossing film of 2001. It was made for $60 million, but went on to bring in almost $500 million worldwide. The movie spawned multiple successful sequels, spin-offs like Puss in Boots, Broadway musicals, theme park attractions, and Shrek became such a phenomenon that people still quote it today. The lead character has even become more recognizable than some Disney princesses. And Shrek won the first ever Oscar for Best Animated Movie, beating Disney for the title. But here's the really deliciously petty part. Katzenberg didn't just beat Disney once. DreamWorks went on to directly compete with Disney's animated releases for many, many years, often timing their movies to come out around the same time as Disney films. He'd essentially taken Disney's own formula, twisted it into something completely different, and on many occasions, beaten them at their own game. Steven Spielberg, when a double rejection gives birth to a legendary franchise. Not many people know this about Steven Spielberg, but he had one serious obsession: make a James Bond movie. Spielberg absolutely loved the spy franchise and thought he'd be perfect to direct at least one of the movies. But when he asked the Bond producers for the job, they said no. Not once, but twice. Big mistake. Because the Bond rejection became the catalyst, Spielberg needed to create one of the most successful and popular action-adventure hero franchises in history. He dusted off a project George Lucas had been nurturing since the early 1970s. an adventure about a daring archaeologist called Indiana Jones. And this was just the opportunity Spielberg needed to build something so iconic and thrilling that it would outperform James Bond in every way. And this was the birth of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Instead of a smooth British agent in a tuxedo sipping martinis, they gave the world a rugged American archaeologist in a leather jacket, cracking whips. Instead of high-tech gadgets, Indiana Jones used his fists. And instead of saving the world from generic villains, he was dodging giant boulders and finding ancient artifacts with supernatural powers. Released in 1981, Raiders became an instant global sensation. Made for just $20 million, it earned over $389 million worldwide, becoming the highest-grossing film of the year. But here's the ultimate irony. Raiders of the Lost Ark didn't just crush the competition that year. It also crushed the Bond film called For Your Eyes Only, released that same year. A movie that only brought in $195 million at the box office, which was about half of Indiana's $389 million box office earnings. A fact that must have been, let's say, quietly satisfying for Spielberg. The movie spawned successful sequels, countless imitations, and Indiana Jones became so iconic that his fedora and whip are now displayed at the Smithsonian. But guess what? Years later, Spielberg delivered the final petty power blow. When he needed to cast Indiana Jones's father in The Last Crusade, he chose Sean Connery, the ultimate James Bond himself. I mean, you've got to love the delicious irony of the director who couldn't get hired to make a Bond film, now turning the most famous Bond actor into a supporting lead, and employee of his more successful franchise.